Hi there. Warner Discovery made some pretty big announcements last month about their future plans to expand production on Game of Thrones related video games. Video game content. I didn't want this to get lost in the shuffle. I know it's been a couple of weeks. It's like the past 3 weeks there was a lot of other spin off news on the Dunk and Egg project, on the Aegon's Conquest movie, but long term, this is also pretty important, from a business standpoint, and I'll go over all this. It was one big, really nice article in Variety, but they made major announcements going up to David Zaslav himself that they want to expand Warner Discovery's video game production, specifically centered around a handful of core IP, core franchises, intellectual property. And this is also his general plan for how they're going to handle TV and movies, that, guys, the boom years are over, and they need to retrench, and whereas the old owners were throwing money away at things that they couldn't afford, he said, let's focus on known franchises. Westeros is one of those. We benefit from that. Really solid, established things. And in terms of video game content, there's a few things you might not be able to make, like a Sex and the City video game or something. I hope not. But specifically with regard to video game tie-ins to franchises, there are 4 IPs that they really want to focus on next 4 to 5 years. Their near future plans for what they're gearing up for now that the merger was done, Warner Discovery merger 2022, and then the strike year 23. Now all that's in the rearview mirror, and they're moving forward, scale the next 5, maybe years even beyond that. 4 major franchises they want to make video games around. DC Comics, Mortal Kombat, Harry Potter, and Game of Thrones. That they mention Game of Thrones by name. They cite it by name as these are one of the core 4 IPs that we're going to be making video game content around. What really influenced this decision is news of the year for 2023 video games, Hogwarts Legacy, which, whether, I know there's discussion around that controversy or whether it's even a good game or not, from a business standpoint, it made them a lot of money in a year where they were almost in the red, that this was a major percentage of their overall revenues. And even on a pie chart of everything they do from movies to TV to video games, that was like a standalone item. That was its own individual slice. The profits from Hogwarts Legacy, just up there on its own. It wasn't just the best-selling video game by Warner or the best-selling game in the United States. 2023, Hogwarts Legacy was the best-selling game worldwide by anyone. It sold over 24 million copies. And in part because it's a major, well-known, popular franchise. And obviously we've seen duds come out of major franchises letting us down, like, Star Wars and other video game tie-ins. I don't need to go with you over the major flops that have come out over the years, but in general it's a better idea to stick to core franchises like that, and that's the real lesson they learned. When they're getting hit on all sides because it's a rough year, this was a major success story. To a little lesser extent, Mortal Kombat was also a really good seller. Mortal Kombat 1, they renumbered it number 1, which came out in September, so it's a little later, but within the space of 4 months, less time, that still sold over 3 million copies, which is a lot. So that's also a success story they point to. And just to give you a sense of the future of what they're going to do, big DC Comics tie-ins like Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, that just came out like 3 weeks ago, February 2nd. Though from what I've heard, the sales weren't near the target that they thought they'd get. So, okay, that isn't like the hand over fist success that Hogwarts Legacy was, but you get the idea. They want to do stuff like that. I've heard rumors that after this, the development team on that wants to do like an open world Wonder Woman tie-in, which, okay, that's another thing that's not just a retread. But DC Comics tie-ins and Mortal Kombat, Hogwarts, these are the things you can expect from them putting out. And a big thing, if you're new here, is we have never really had successful Westeros video game tie-ins. We've never had a real attempt, the way that there's decent Harry Potter video games or Star Wars video games. It's just not a thing we've had. Even Lord of the Rings, Lord of the Rings isn't the type of thing that has spin-offs. So when they have a game, I go, well, it's a nice game, but it's not the thing that's supposed to expand the lore, because Tolkien's dead, whereas George R. R. Martin is often like, yeah, expand it. Other people get to tell stories in this. So the real example I'm using is Star Wars of, is it another narrative set in that universe that's a good tie-in game? Of course, for me, I guess there's two kinds of games. There's the kind where you're just playing the story like you are Luke Skywalker playing the Battle of Hoth, fair enough, and people are focused on the game mechanics. But when you play for story, I'm the type of person who plays for original story, like Mass Effect. I'm playing to feel like I'm there and learn about all the alien races, or RTS games, a lot of that, where I feel like I'm commanding and building an empire builders, that kind of thing. So I know a lot of people are in it purely for the tech specs and just you open up your new copy of whatever Halo game and you go straight to multiplayer. You're not playing the game. I'm the story type, but that's me. I understand. A lot of the industry is fueled by people who are just into gaming, but I mean one-on-one live gaming. But fair enough. Point is, we haven't really had video game content, really good video game content before. We've had a lot of bombs, a lot of things, like when Game of Thrones was just starting, like 2011, 2012, there was a slew of aborted plans that just never, they all fizzled out. And there have been a few, none of those really, they were bombs, some never got released. There have been iPhone games that there really haven't been any major success stories to make it a true cross-platform franchise, like a Star Wars thing. But going through this variety report, to give you a sense of the state of the industry, of why Warner is expanding this way, look at, they made this nice list of the top console or PC titles of 2023. Number 1, Hogwarts Legacy by Warner Gaming. Then you've got Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 by Activision. EA, Electronic Arts, did Madden NFL. Spider-Man 2 from Sony. Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom by Nintendo. Diablo 4 by Blizzard, which is part of Activision. Call of Duty 2, Activision. Mortal Kombat 1, like I said, that's by Warner. Star Wars Jedi Survivor by EA, and EA Sports, again, by them. That's what you're looking at in terms of their competition, but it doesn't really give you an accurate picture because these are console and PC titles, and that's what a lot of gamer magazines, gamer industry news, which is a whole cottage industry unto itself, reports on. When you look at raw revenue numbers, most of the raw revenue actually comes from mobile games because everyone has a phone, and they have a couple of other advantages. You think they're nickel and diming, basically, that everyone picks up this iPhone game or mobile game because it's on, Android as well, and you play it, and they're cheap, quick and cheap and easy to make. They don't have a really in-depth game like Hogwarts Legacy or The Last of Us or Grand Theft Auto, a big sandbox, but there's subplots in it. Narrative releases like that have a turnaround development time of something like 3 to 4 years. Like the next Red Dead Redemption, or Last of Us 3, Hogwarts Legacy 2, or Star Wars Jedi Survivor 2, or whatever. It takes 3 years to make those. And unlike TV, they have they have a lower churn time, that people watch a TV show, then they're done with it. A video game you tend to play for more hours. And while these are big tentpole hits, the real money and cash flow comes from mobile games, preferably live gaming, because if you're using it as a head-to-head, FPS gaming fighting thing like multiplayer teams, red versus blue Halo kind of stuff, people will play that for years, long after they've exhausted the story content, because they're enjoying it as a platform. So the ideal here is actually a cheap and quick to make mobile game that you play head-to-head with someone else. Those have a high shelf life, they're quick and easy to make. And we have demonstrably seen, in terms of revenue numbers, that they make a lot of money. Now, I don't have a breakdown by game, but I do have a list Variety gave of the top gaming companies of the year. This time including companies that do make mobile games. And you can see, like, Apple is near the top of the list, because they make mobile games, and that is generally more profitable than these handful of tentpole big releases. Even though those are the things I, as a fan, obsess over, I barely pay attention. I don't really play iPhone games, but I recognize other people do, and they're just everywhere. So just to run down the top 10 list here of gaming revenue. Number 1, Tencent, which is a Chinese company, 15.4 billion. Sony, which does make PlayStation, 8 billion, and Naughty Dog is a subsidiary of Sony. Apple, 6.9 billion, all of those mobile games. Microsoft Gaming, which just bought up a bunch of other studios, 6 billion. But they just bought up Activision Blizzard, so this is the last time you'll see those separate. That also Activision Blizzard on its own got 4.4 billion down the list. But then you got NetEase, which is another Chinese company that they port over things and make mobile games in China, so that's another 5 billion. Google is on here because of Android games, 5 billion. Then you get Electronic Arts, 3.8 billion, Nintendo, 3.1. The other big ones would be Take-Two Interactive, 2.4 billion. I'm counting this as the parent company, including all the smaller companies, because Take-Two owns Rockstar and 2K, so they have, including their subsidiaries, franchises like BioShock, Borderlands, Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead Redemption, all of that. And further down the list, like at 890 million, so that's 0.89 billion, you've got like Ubisoft and stuff. But that's in terms of what are the top companies you're looking at. So just looking at a list of the top companies, including the ones that make mobile games, so many of the top 5 on the top of the list here are, when you include all the little mobile games, they add up. Because they're cheaper, quicker to make, you can dash one off in a year, and if they're head-to-head games with no narrative, people are just playing them against each other, they have no reason to stop, so they have pretty good longevity and in-app purchases, of course. So those are the trends we're looking at here. First, Apple and Google, mobile app games. Second, I don't know if you should count the Chinese companies. They're for porting over things, but they are also for mobile things. Same thing, I covered that. And just some homework here, point 3, of who bought who. There's been a lot of consolidation in the video game industry recently. This is for new people like me. I've not really a video game channel, so forgive me if I'm new at this, everyone who came in here. But Microsoft has been, I've been living under a rock, but even I know Microsoft has been buying up other companies. Microsoft bought up Bethesda in 2021. That was a parent company for Fallout and a couple other things. Then Activision, their parent company Vivendi, bought Blizzard back in 2008, but they kept Blizzard around just for Blizzard games as a subsidiary of that. This past October 2023, Microsoft just bought Activision and Blizzard. So Activision and Blizzard are being merged into Microsoft Gaming in parallel to how all the streamers are starting to merge, like Warner Discovery, and consolidate. They're starting to do that too. Also, in terms of who has consoles, it's not about the consoles anymore. A lot of it's about the mobile games or stuff you run as software on your computer. I mean, the only people really making consoles are Sony, because of PlayStation, and Microsoft Gaming, because of Xbox. And arguably Nintendo with the Switch. I mean, it depends. I'm not going to get into that. But generally, the story here is that the article talks about this. Most IP holders realized it didn't make sense to have, economically, to have their own subdivision that makes their own in-house video games. It was easier just to license the IP to third-party professional video game developers. This generally worked out. So you see on that first list there, like, Sony made Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Electronic Arts made Star Wars titles like Star Wars Jedi Survivor. They don't really make their own in-house stuff with Disney IP like that. However, and this is a key point of the article I want you to take away from this video, in our case for Game of Thrones stuff, we are in a bit of an unusual position, that it is unusual that out of most of these major Hollywood IP company platforms, Warner Brothers actually still has its own in-house development team. Whereas Disney will license Marvel and Star Wars stuff out to third parties, Warner Brothers still has an in-house video game development division. It's led by the guy who talked with them in the article, J.B. Perrett. And let me quote off the article here with the slide. As most legacy Hollywood companies have shifted their gaming businesses to licensing models, Warner Brothers Games remains the only major studio with an in-house video game business, other than, well, technically Sony Pictures, because Sony Pictures the movies after Madam Web. Oh, well, we have... No, you are not a movie studio that has a video game. You're a video game company that has a movie studio. You know what I mean? But I'm cutting in here. So really, like Disney and Netflix and stuff, they license stuff, and who knows if that's a good strategy going forward, but time will tell. So like they said, and he says what I was just saying, that most of the money is really in mobile games, nickel and diming, they add up, and they have a better cost ratio. But I mean, if you spend $100 million on Last of Us 3, and it profits you $110 million, that's not as good of a profit ratio as I spent $1 million on a mobile game and I made back $10 million. In terms of, we're thinking about ratios here, return on investment ratios. And from a purely business standpoint, it galls me as a fan of video games as an art form and a narrative that, I mean, all the time I would update in Game of Thrones wiki, I just never, no, none of us, me, none of the other people who go on there, even people on the Westeros.org wiki, don't really update anything about the ones that are purely mobile games because they don't have any story to them. So we don't bother recording them or anything about them, but they're actually really popular and driving a lot of the business. And so it shocks me. It's completely under our radar, not just for me, but ask any other of the... Have you seen other YouTubers reporting on, and here's something the mobile game did today? The one time they tried to make a narrative game for Telltale, we reported on it. I'll get to that. But to give his quote here, with the focus shifting from console and PC-based games with 3 to 4 year release schedules, a good example of what to expect more of from Warner Brothers is mobile games like Game of Thrones Conquest, which checks that always-on box. This one sentence is the point of the article and point of this video, that in the near term, expect a lot of stuff like Game of Thrones Conquest, if you haven't heard of that already. And he says, something I agree with, it keeps the TV franchise fresh in people's minds between seasons. And he says we're looking for new content stuff that, even if it isn't generating that much of a profit ratio as a game, now I do think it does, as it's a cheap, quick-to-make mobile game and it makes a decent amount of money, that's one thing. You have to think in terms of the wider level of PR campaigns and marketing. I have to agree that it's a good way to keep the franchise alive and the buzz going in the public eye to have a bunch of new mobile app releases. We are going 20 months between seasons 1 and 2, and it's a longer of House of the Dragon. It's a longer gap because they didn't know if it'd be a hit. They had to gear up season 2. We'll never have a gap this long again. Even so, look at how the viewership numbers on YouTube and just Google Trends have dropped off to nothing. I think they're like, Google Trends were down to 2% of what we were on Google Trends in the active season. And me and the generally active covering filming news thing like Red Team Review, Preston Jacobs, All Shift X, Glidus, we're still pulling in we're doing better than most, and we're still pulling in 1/10 of what we did during the active season, fall 2022. That in terms of just looking at those Google trends and the algorithm maps, cranking out some mindless app games is a good idea as a promotional gimmick. As much as I hate to admit it, it has its place. So, what are you going to do? So, I'm upset about that because, upset that it does sound like they do want to gear up to make more narrative content again, because the same article also does cite, look how successful Warner Brothers Gaming itself was with Hogwarts Legacy. I want our version of Hogwarts Legacy, not specific, don't make fun of it, something akin to that in scale, or Jedi Survivor, our tie-in on that scale that tells its own story. And I think they're also, from the way it sounded, that they're also doing that, but it will take time. That, as they said, it will take 3 to 4 years to get a quality game through the production cycle. And let's say that because the whole they didn't know if it'd be a hit, it was a dead franchise, and it was spring of 2023 when they really sat down to start planning these things, we'd be looking at a video game like Christmas of 2026 at the earliest. Probably later. I think like right now in the offices of Warner Brothers, they're discussing we should hire writers and developers to plan out our version of Jedi Survivor Hogwarts Legacy scale video game for Westeros. If they started that right now, we're looking like Christmas 2026, more likely 2027, just because that's how long they take to make. I don't blame them for that. That's relatively normal. So between now and then, like this time next year, expect a pretty big swath of new mobile app games. And recognize it's not just the game itself, it's a promotional thing. It's a tie-in thing to keep buzz going. And we learned the hard way we really do need to keep buzz going. I understand that. As much as it chagrins me, but what are you going to do? I do want to take one moment to mourn that I felt really bad. Like the one time we got a decent tie-in game that was actually trying to tell a narrative was Christmas 2014, 9 years ago. Oh, years ago. Oh, God, it was so long. When we had Telltale Games make a tie-in video game. And again, I play for story, so I wasn't into the gameplay or anything, but just real thought went into making that thing. After a string of failures, after so many... There were half a dozen video games they announced when the season 1 was aired, all of which failed or were flops. And then kind of late, like 4 years into it, we got this pretty decent game from Telltale, where they bothered to, the visuals were okay, they bothered to think out the, it was like a choose your adventure thing. I'm not really into that, but effort went into this. There was real writing, and they went that extra step of they hired the core cast members from Game of Thrones to voice themselves. So it's almost like lost content now that you had Kit Harington and Emilia Clarke, and just all the 6 of the regular cast members came back to voice themselves. And for a shining moment, this is before season 5 went bad, we thought, wow, this might really turn into our Star Wars, where it's this multi-platform thing where you have, like people from Mandalorian, the TV show, could cameo as themselves, voicing themselves in a video game or something, cross-platform stuff. For a shining moment, we thought that would almost happen, and it was weird seeing, like in early 2015, seeing, more effort went into that video game than went into season 5. And just, they didn't even put in the token effort of, like, making a stray reference to the Foresters in season 5. You could have done it in a line of dialogue. They just didn't care. So Telltale came back from the dead or something, but I don't know if they'll ever make a follow-up to that. It was nearly a decade ago, even if it was popular. I respected the amount of thought that went into that, and it's not canon or anything, but that was the one time, the one thing you can even mention as a halfway decent video game. From my perspective of focusing on story. Now, there's a lot of mobile games for this, though. So one other thing I'll caution you is Game of Thrones Conquest is the example they cite, because that was made by Warner. This is entirely different from Game of Thrones Winter is Coming, which you've probably seen advertised very heavily. That's that whole thing where Benioff and Weiss sold the video game rights to Yuzu Group in China, who, not coincidentally, own the rights to Three Body Problem. And now they're making a Three Body Problem adaptation. Not that this is illegal or anything. It makes sense. We're trading licenses for things. We'll trade... If you want us to adapt your thing, we'll trade you the video game license, because we know it's a very lucrative license. It's not illegal or unfair or anything. It's just kind of silly if that's why Yuzu got the rights to make Game of Thrones Winter is Coming, which they promote all the time. I've never played it once. I have no desire to try. It's just an app game. It has no story to it. But no, that's entirely separate from Game of Thrones Conquest. That is the example they cite because it was made by Warner Gaming in-house. So they said, the next 2 years while we're gearing up, expect more mobile games because they're quick to make. I've been talking about this more in other videos, that by late 2026, we'll have geared up for everything. It's like warming up a diesel engine, that this was a dead franchise, that they said, we want to make a cinematic universe, we want to make more than one TV show. But due to the production time, you're only going to get 2 shows in a single calendar year by 2026. They also want to make an Aegon's Conquest movie. The earliest we'd be seeing that is Christmas 2026, probably later. But come back here in almost 3 years' time, Christmas season 2026, we'll be having 2 TV shows, a movie, and probably talk of a real video game in the works. Not released yet, but they'll be starting to do promotional stuff for, we're working on this thing that's like our version of Jedi Survivor or Hogwarts Legacy. A video game on that scale is coming. And again, this is one of only 4 IPs that they mentioned by name. That this is how Warner Gaming is going to get its foot in the door in the gaming industry again. We're going to get Harry Potter, Mortal Kombat, DC Comics, and Game of Thrones. They are doubling down on us as a franchise. That's good news. It'll take about 2 years to gear up, though, but in the near future you'll be seeing more of these things, which hopefully, even though they're just app games, will get buzz going. And just as a promotional thing, like, as you would see like a trailer or a poster, hey, here's a cheap app game. I would like to see this as a multi-platform thing with different stories, not just following the main characters. Tell me in the comments, what would you do as a video game? Because I don't like the ones where it's, hey, I'm playing as Luke. I like Luke Skywalker. I like the ones where it's set in the universe, but it's its own story. My idea for this is, sort of like, have you ever played one of those Mech Commander, Mech Warrior, Mercenaries games or something? My idea is, well, where is there a lot of fighting? In the disputed lands and in the stepstones of the free cities, or there's constant low-level wars between the free cities and Essos. And the wars aren't really between the free cities, but between mercenary armies that they hire, like the Golden Company, like the Second Sons. So I thought a good idea for a game would be like MechWarrior 4 Mercenaries or something, or an RPG game. You hire up and build up your own mercenary army, and you fight various battles in the free cities. But look, it wouldn't make sense to have a video game where you have an invented story where you conquer King's Landing in every game. That isn't what really happened. You could play as Daemon Blackfire, you could play as Aegon the Conqueror with historical battles. If you want a battle that really takes place in that universe, it wouldn't be something that can disrupt history that much. Like, Star Wars terms again. If you want something that's a canonical story, you could set it in one star system and have people fighting over this one star system. But you can't have them literally blow up Coruscant, because that's a canon location. Just zoom in on some local low-level battle and see how it plays out, like with Mercenaries and the Stepstones. Another thing I would do is, just as the Telltale games said, we want to see the conflict between the Stark loyalists and Bolton loyalists from the ground level with one of the minor houses. That was a good idea, I just don't think they developed it enough. In case of House of the Dragon, I think you could have a game where you follow really heavily as the main characters the Blackwoods and Brackens. Because you'd see them a little in Season 2 in the fighting, but the day-to-day fighting, the raiding back and forth on a daily basis, not major battles, just the day-to-day raiding of the war in the Riverlands, between the second and third tier houses like Blackwood and Bracken or something. Or in the Reach, you'd have the Caswells fighting the Hightower army or something. The lower level stuff can be canon. That's how I'd make a video game and still fit it in as part of that universe as a tie-in. And then again, you could do world-spanning stuff that has nothing to do with the current TV show. You could do stuff from World of Ice and Fire about Yi Ti and the Summer Isles and all that. That has its place. There's a blank canvas for us to what are things we'd like to see as video games, and in different genres. Some of these could be empire-building things. There's also plenty of mods for Crusader Kings Westeros Edition and stuff, I don't know, but there is actual movement, real movement behind the scenes at Warner, that this is one of the major IP franchises we want to expand into video game content for.